Hello everyone. Welcome to First Online University, a global platform for all your education and growth related needs. In this lecture, we're going to start with a new chapter that is chemistry in everyday life. And this chapter is going to be very interesting and you will be able to relate this chapter to genuinely you'll be able to relate this chapter to everyday life, that is things that you see around yourself, things that you consume. Most importantly, all of them involve chemistry to some extent or the other, and that is what we are going to study in this entire chapter. No learning apart from a few structures, etc. No learning will be required. There will be just simple understanding that would be required for you to be using in this particular chapter. In this lecture, we'll be introducing the concept of chemistry in everyday life, and then we'll be beginning with the concept of drugs, that is the medicines. Okay, then mechanism of drug action and receptors as drug targets. Before we begin, a piece of information for you. You can use the coupon codes mission JEE or mission NEET while you enroll at First Online University for mission JEE or NEET in order to avail good discounts. Now, what are the three basic needs of any human being? You must have heard a very famous film dialogue, roti kapda makan, right? That's the three basic needs of any human being, right? That's what we have actually: food, clothing, and shelter. These are the three basic needs of human being. But there is a fourth basic need. And what is that? That is medicine. Especially in today's life, when you know the lifestyle is so hectic, people don't have a good work life balance. They suffer from a lot of mental issues, mental health issues. And not only that, a lot of physical health issues have also been evolved because what we eat is not pure. We don't have time to exercise, we have a very different schedule. We don't wake up so early. We don't eat on like on the time we are supposed to. The breakfast is like near to the lunchtime. The lunchtime is near to the tea time. The tea time is so late, and then the dinner is so late. So this whole cycle is disturbed, because of which we become prone to getting many diseases, and because of which we have to take medicines. Okay, there is just no other option that we have. It's like we survive on medicines only. So that becomes the fourth basic need of any human being, that is medicine, which is an integral part of our life. So there are four basic needs: food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. So chemistry has a vital role to play in our day-to-day life because it improves the quality of our life. Thus the name of the chapter, chemistry in everyday life. So we are going to talk about chemicals in medicines, chemicals in food products, and chemicals in cleaning agents. So it's like going to have four significant quadrants: prevention, because it's important that before any disease occurs, we have actually taken preventive measures. Then diagnosis. Just by chance, we did not take sufficient precautions, which we say prevention is better than cure. So supposedly we've not taken, and we feel some uneasiness because of that disease. So we'll first go for a diagnosis. Now, once the diagnosis is done, then comes the treatment, and lastly, after the treatment is complete, we get cured. So prevention, if not, then followed by diagnosis to find out what the disease is, then the treatment, that is medication that is going to be given, and ultimately cure. Okay, so these are the four basic quadrants. Based on this simple introduction, let's have a look at few MCQs. The fourth basic need of human being is medicines. Option 4 is the correct answer. Next, which of the following are included in the four quadrants that define a drug? Prevention, yes. Diagnosis, yes. Cure, yes. So all of these is the correct answer. Option D. Okay. Next, we start with the concept or topic of drug. Now, what is a drug? See, what we come across drug as in newspapers, in news, etc., is something that causes addiction, right? Which is not good for our health. But let me tell you, even medicines are drugs. But since medicines are taken in a prescribed small quantity, therefore they do not cause an addiction. But since drugs, when they are going to be taken in a huge amount, then we get addicted to them, and that is what leads to them becoming useless. Okay. So let us first define what is a drug: a substance which is used for the purpose of prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and cure of a disease. This has been derived from the French word drogue, meaning dry herb. Drugs are chemicals of low molecular masses, 100 to 500 mu. Drugs interact with the macromolecular targets within our body and they produce a biological response. So this is how we define medicine and chemotherapy. Chemotherapy. Therapy means something that is useful for the treatment, and chemo means making use of chemicals. So chemicals used for the treatment is known as chemotherapy. And obviously chemicals means medicines. So when biological response is therapeutic and useful, these chemicals are called medicines. And if medicines are taken in higher doses, then they'll act as poisons. Use of chemicals for therapeutic effect is known as chemotherapy. Now, what are the characteristics of an ideal drug? It should not disturb normal physiological processes which are taking place in the body. It should not be like, we take a drug or we take a medicine and it starts producing side effects in our body. That should not happen. Secondly, it should be harmless to the host, that is the person who is taking the medicines, should not be harmed by these medicines, but it should destroy whatever harmful microbes are present. So antibiotics are going to for example, kill the intestinal flora. Then it can cause stomachache. They should have minimum side effects. They should be localized to the affected area. They should not affect the other areas in the body. Local anesthesia is one such example where numbness or is going to be caused in one particular area only. Then there is general anesthesia, which causes the numbness of the whole body. Now, how can we classify drugs? The drugs can be classified based on pharmacological effects. That is, they could be analgesics, antiseptics, anti-cancer drugs. Then based on the action of the drug, they could be antihistamines or tranquilizers. Slowly and gradually, you'll come to know about all of them. So don't worry at this particular point of time. Then based on chemical structure, they could be penicillins or sulfonylurea. Based on the molecular targets, they could be proteins, that is enzyme receptors, or the targets could be nucleic acids. So based on this, let's quickly have a look at few MCQs. Drugs are classified on the basis of chemical structure, pharmacological effects, molecular targets, or all of the above. All of the above. Option D is the correct answer. Next, drug is a substance used for the purpose of prevention, diagnosis, treatment. All of the above. Yes, option D is the correct answer. Next, we move on to the mechanism of drug action, that is drug-target interaction. So what happens is whenever we take any particular drug, it has a target where it goes and it shows its effect there. So this interaction that is taking place between the drug and the target is what we are going to study. That is a particular mechanism. So what is the mechanism? Let us say the drug targets, that is where the drug has to go and bind, is the protein. Okay, so what will happen is proteins are one of the macromolecules of biological origin and they perform various functions in the body. Okay, now what is the action of drugs on enzymes? First of all, what are enzymes? Enzymes are biocatalysts, which are going to biological catalysts, okay, that catalyze a lot of reactions inside our body. Now enzymes are circulating proteins which are found in the blood. Okay, now there could be a normal mechanism. So when we talk about, when there is an enzyme, there is a substrate also that will bind to the enzyme and show its activity. So that's the normal mechanism. But what happens to the mechanism in the presence of drug? Now let us say that you've been caught with common cold, or not say common cold, with some microbial infection. Okay, so what will happen is that this particular microbe is going to be acting as the substrate which will bind to a particular enzyme and that or a particular protein, and it will show, or supposedly a virus, you've got common cold and or there is some serious viral that you've got. So this virus is going to bind to a particular protein. Okay, that's like the protein, and there is a receptor site on it on which the virus will go and bind. That is the normal mechanism or the life cycle of virus that is going on inside the body. But what happens is when we administer a drug to that particular patient who has been diagnosed with this particular viral infection, then what will happen is this drug is actually going to act onto the virus and it will change the metabolic processes of the virus, or in some case it will go and bind to the receptor site on the enzyme so that the other substrate could not bind to it. So that's the mechanism in the presence of drug. Now in the presence of drug, it could either be competitive inhibition or non-competitive inhibition. So what happens in competitive inhibition is, I'm just telling you superficially right now, we'll be discussing that in detail later on. So competitive inhibition means, so if this is the receptor site on the enzyme, so this is the drug, this is the substrate. The drug will go and bind onto the receptor site and will prevent the substrate from binding to the receptor site. That is, it is competing with the substrate to bind to the active site on the enzyme. Non-competitive inhibition is where the drug is going to bind to some other site on the enzyme and it will change the shape of the receptor site in a way that even if the substrate comes, it will not be able to bind to the active site of the enzyme. So non-competitively, it is inhibiting the normal mechanism. Okay, so let us see what the normal mechanism is. So function of an enzyme is to hold the substrate for any chemical reaction. So active site of the enzyme holds the substrate molecule in a suitable position and the substrate is going to bind to the active site of the enzyme through a variety of interactions. Now, what could these interactions be? So if you see, this is the enzyme which has an active site. So when the substrate comes and binds to it, we have an enzyme substrate complex. What type of interactions could take place? They could be either ionic bonding, hydrogen bonding, covalent bond, van der Waals interactions, any of the four. Now, once the complex is formed, then the product is going to be formed and the active site of the enzyme is going to get emptied or vacant. Now, what happens to the mechanism in the presence of a drug? Let us first talk about competitive inhibition. So, if we have the active site of the enzyme and a substrate, and there is a drug which is very similar in shape to the active site of the enzyme, so what will happen is there is a competition between the drug and the substrate as to who is going to bind the active site of the enzyme first. So, drug inhibits or hinders the activity of the enzyme, and in case of non-competitive inhibition, there is an active site of the enzyme and there is an allosteric site, that is a site other than the active site on the enzyme. The drug is going to bind to the allosteric site and it will change the shape of the active site in such a way that now the substrate will not have a suitable shape to bind to the active site of the enzyme. So shape of the active site changes and thus the substrate cannot occupy the active site, as you can see in the picture. So drug inhibits the action of the enzyme but in a non-competitive manner. So based on this, let's quickly have a look at few MCQs. Enzymes are carbohydrates, proteins, right? Option B is the correct answer. Next, which type of bonds exist in enzyme substrate complex? Ionic bond, yes. Hydrogen, yes. Van der Waals force, yes. So all of these, option D is the correct answer. Third question, which of the following binds at the allosteric site in the non-competitive drug inhibition? Substrate, drug, both A and B or either A or B is the drug. So option B is the correct answer. Next, we talk about receptors as drug targets. Now, what are the receptors? One is proteins that we've already discussed. The nucleic acids also act as drug targets. Now, targets is one thing. Then there is an active site or a receptor which is present. So if this is my target, that could either be a protein or a nucleic acid, there has to be a receptor site or an active site present on which the substrate can come and bind. So receptors are basically proteins that are crucial to body's communication process. Majority of these are embedded in the cell membranes. So receptor proteins are embedded in the cell membrane in such a way that their small part possessing active site will project out of the surface of the membrane and it will open on the outside region of the cell membrane. Okay. So what is like the action of drugs on the receptor proteins? So if you have the cell membrane and you have phosphobilipid layer, obviously you know the structure of cell membrane, and in between there are receptor proteins that are present. So what will happen is when you talk about receptor as drug target, substrate is the chemical messenger. Let us say these are hormones. Okay. Now the receptor is going to regain its shape. Now there are two things. One is agonist and the other is antagonist. Now what is agonist? The drug attaches to the binding site of the receptor and it cops. So see what happens is that in order to make sure that the medicine that we are taking is going to be acting just like a normal chemical messenger or a hormone would have. See, for instance, suppose you develop hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, or you can say you develop any such disease where the hormone is not synthesized in a sufficient quantity that it can actually go and bind to the receptor. Okay, so in that case you would require some artificial drug, in place of that hormone, which can go and bind to the receptor and perform the function of that hormone. Okay, that is what the function of medicine is. That if you are, if you are diabetic, you cannot have the insulin properly functioning. You take the medicines so that now instead of the insulin, these medicines function in a proper way. Okay. So that is where agonists come into picture. What is an agonist? Agonist is a drug that attaches to the binding site of the receptor and it is going to copy the action of the messenger. And these are useful when there is a lack of natural chemical messenger. As I've just told you, when the natural chemical messenger is present in a lesser amount, then we introduce an agonist. Then antagonist. When the natural chemical messenger is being produced in a huge amount, okay, then it is required that all of it does not bind to the enzyme, right? So what will happen is, in order to prevent, so if like it is required that only 10 molecules of that hormone need to be, or of that chemical messenger need to bind to the active site of the enzyme, but since now 20 of them are being produced, all 20 of them are binding, so that will also result in some disease in the body. Since we do not want that, so for that reason also we'll take a drug so that to rest of the 10 sites the drug binds, and only the 10 molecules of the natural chemical messenger will go and bind to the active site of the enzyme. So in such a case where drug is attaching to the binding site of the receptor, that is, it is opposing the action of the messenger, the drug is going to be called as an antagonist. Okay. So if you look at the phosphobilipid layer and there are receptor proteins that are present, this is supposedly insulin. Now, chemical messenger binds at the active site of the binding site of the receptor protein. So this is the, if you can see, this is the phosphobilipid layer and this is my receptor protein whose one active site is, outside the surface of the cell membrane. Okay, so change in the configuration of the receptor protein will take place and as a result, this appears as a message in the cell. Okay, and the side is going to change in a way that now the glucose molecules are going to be taken up by insulin and the chemical messenger will then leave the active site. Okay, chemical messenger here is what? Insulin. So receptor is then going to regain its shape. So what will happen is first insulin is going, which is the chemical messenger, will bind to the receptor protein. It will change its shape. And then when it has performed its function, then the chemical messenger leaves the receptor site and the receptor again changes its or regains its shape. Okay. So this is the chemical messenger. And these are small glucose molecules. Again, this is the process where message is going to be sent to the cell that now the glucose molecules are going to be, taken up by insulin. And this is how the whole process is going to function. So let's have a look at few MCQs. A type of drug which activates the action of receptor is known as, which activates the action of receptor? Agonist, enzymes, antagonist, or all of the above. So it is agonist. Option A is the correct answer. Next, the chemicals which carry different messages between neurons and muscles are known as enzymes, chemical messengers, hormones, or biological messengers. They're known as chemical messengers. Option B is the correct answer. Next question, drug which binds the receptor and disturbs their function. Disturbs the function is antagonist. Option C is the correct answer. So this is all that we had to cover in, drugs, then receptors on the drug targets, and we have also discussed the molecules, how they actually go and bind to the mechanism of drug action also. Then in the next lecture, we are going to talk in detail about these various types of drugs. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel for joining YouTube live classes for best NEET or JEE coaching. You can also download the First Online University mobile app through Google Play Store or App Store for continuous learning through your smartphones. Keep learning with First Online University, a team of millions of learners and educators worldwide.